China is widely acknowledged to be the world's leading supplier and consumer of a wide range of crops, but Chinese farmers are facing numerous problems. If you want to know more about the increasing number of farming problems putting China's food security at risk, keep watching this video for all the interesting details revealed so far. Let's begin. Concerns about grain manufacture shortage. Chinese farmers are facing many difficulties as the spring planting season begins. This might put the nation's capacity to secure enough food supplies at risk this year. Some farmers in the Northeast have been forced to deal with tight COVID restrictions that prevent them from plowing their fields and spreading seeds. More than a significant portion of China's grain is produced in this region. For those who are able to go to work, anti-pollution restrictions barring the burning of stubble have become an issue. Farmers around the world still use this method because they believe it to be the fastest and most cost-effective way to clear land of the previous harvest's remaining straw and waste before the new planting season. However, the Chinese administration has advised farmers to use equipment to collect the garbage and deliver it to neighboring power plants, where it may be burned for fuel instead of burning it in their fields. A large number of farmers have resorted to social media to express their dissatisfaction with the advice. Some individuals even believe that fewer seeds will sprout and grow into plants as a result of the inferior soil conditions and increased pests left behind by equipment like these. Because of the uncertainty around the decision, there are growing concerns about a shortage of domestic grain manufacture, which could lead to an increase in imports. Weak influence in global supply chains. In 2021, China imported a historic 164.5 million tons of grain, representing an increase of 18.1% over the previous year, according to Chinese customs estimates. China's food self-sufficiency rate has dropped from 101.8% in 2000 to 76.8% in 2020, according to Du Ying, a former deputy head of the National Director of the China Food and Drug Administration and member of the National Development and Reform Commission. According to analysts, China's agriculture firms are lacking in global effect and integrated strategy in global markets that are controlled by the ABCD quartet of grain dealers. According to Du, Chinese President Xi Jinping's going out strategy should be strengthened, and the country should study the ABCD quartet's trading approach in order to gain influence in the global agriculture supply chain. It is Du's opinion that funding should be established to assist Chinese firms in their international agriculture initiatives that are in conformity with national policies. His advice was to avoid outright purchase or leasing of property in foreign countries for grain production because of major political and social sensitivities. Corruption and waste of strategic reserves. As of yet, no information has been released on the overall amount of grain China has on hand. According to data from 2019, China's warehouses had a total storage space of 910 million metric tons in the year 2018. The Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, China's most powerful anti-corruption agency, has launched a special inquiry into allegations of wrongdoing in grain purchases and sales. Every year, millions of tons of grain are lost in China due to inadequate storage and transportation techniques, as well as overzealous preparation. A law prohibiting food waste was passed by Chinese legislators in March 2021. The law also calls for increased centralized control of grain storage and distribution in order to avoid grain losses from occurring. Declining domestic soybean and oil crop output. Each year, China imports more than 80% of its soybean consumption. Since soy is so heavily imported, it's long been considered as the weak link in the country's food security, even while it has freed up farmland for other crops like rice and wheat. China's soybean output has declined by 16.4%, while planting acreage has decreased by 1.47 million hectares, more than twice as much as the 3.8% drop in soybean imports in 2021. In order to achieve self-sufficiency in 5 to 10 years, Beijing plans to increase planting of soybean and oil crops in 2022. The Agricultural Ministry has included things like converting certain rice fields in northeastern regions to soybean production, experimenting with soy production on salt-alkali land, and increasing subsidies for corn-soy intercropping on China's to-do list. That's all about the increasing number of farming problems that put China's food security at risk. Now let's move on to some other news. Increased agricultural production and and grain security. For many Asian regions, grain security is a top priority when it comes to food security. It comes as no surprise that this is a primary priority for China's central government as well, and likely to remain so in the future. As it turns out, grain security literally translates to meal security in Chinese. China's food security plan prioritizes grain self-sufficiency. Thus, the country has made significant political and budgetary investments and altered its grain production patterns on a spatio-temporal scale to achieve this goal. And to some extent, these attempts have been successful. China's domestic grain output climbed by over 60 million metric tons between 2003 and 2013, with the majority of that increase coming from the country's main grain-producing regions: the Mid and Lower Yangtze River region, the Northeast China Plain, and the North China Plateau. New policies and strategies introduced by Chinese officials. China's central authorities have introduced a number of policies and strategies aimed at promoting domestic grain production. Grain security legislation was first proposed by the National People's Congress in January 2021. In China's 14th five-year plan from 2021 to 2025, grain security was also included, with the country expecting to produce more than 650 million metric tons of grain per year. To maintain food security, China's Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs' current five-year agricultural plan from 2021 to 2025 on crop cultivation has set a goal of 700 million metric tons of grain by 2025. Rice, wheat, and corn were among the grains included in the plan, as were planting targets and farmland allocations to meet these goals. When it comes to grain farmland, China is aiming to keep it over 1.7 billion mu, about 112 million square miles, while the planting acreage of crops and staple crops must remain above 1.4 billion mu and over 800 million mu respectively. Grain security was once again stressed at the Rural Work Conference of December last year. Grain output in China is expected to remain constant in 2022, according to the pledge made at last year's summit. The government will also focus on developing oil crops, cultivating high-quality varieties, and encouraging the planting of maize and soybeans together to improve area and yield, according to Tang, China's agricultural minister. China's leader proclaimed that the Chinese people should grasp their rice bowls firmly in their hands, with grains mostly produced by themselves during the same month. Genetically modified crops and food security. GM crops, such as GM soybeans and GM corn, should also be taken into account. As the first country to grow GM crops commercially, China has been unable to move forward with commercialization. In spite of this, the country's senior authorities have advocated advancement in biotech breeding, or GM crops, which are viewed as crucial to preserving food security. According to reports, China's government is considering changes that would allow for the planting of GM seeds to increase local production of crops. This might also allow other countries to import millions of tons of soybean and corn, which would alter world market supplies and pricing. China's Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs has released a number of draft laws and pronouncements that indicate the country is ready to allow expanded use of genetically modified organisms in agriculture. Political views regarding genetically modified crops. Some time ago, Japan's Agriculture and Rural Affairs Ministry published draft rules outlining the registration procedures for herbicides used on crops containing genetically modified organisms. When the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs said in December 2021 that it planned to improve the safety of more domestic GM maize varieties in January 2022, it was the first step towards allowing the importation of 2 more GM corn types. It's possible that China may continue to demonstrate an interest in gene-edited plants as well. A number of countries around the world have already implemented or are considering implementing genetic editing. For the first time in more than a decade, Japan's Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs has released trial regulations for the approval of gene-edited plants. Once gene-edited plants have completed pilot tests, a production certificate can be requested according to the proposed regulations. To put it another way, the lengthy field trials required to get a GM plant approved are no longer necessary. Gene editing technology is also faster than conventional breeding or genetically modified organisms. China may encourage the development of climate-smart seeds to increase domestic production in light of the many pressures China and other countries face, including water quality and quantity issues, limited farmland, land degradation, severe soil pollution, and climate change impacts alongside urbanization and shifting demographics. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think about the problems Chinese farmers are facing? Let us know in in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one!